Hey everybody, this is Kurt Molly here with my good friend, Mr. Adam Lyons. As you can tell, the sun's setting just a little bit, so I had to change the lighting here just a little bit. Adam has perfect lighting. Well, he has perfect hair and he has that perfect beard. Well, we'll talk about that here in just a second. So when I say Adam's a friend, I've known Adam for many, many, many years. Now, I know Adam because of David Gonzalez. You've heard me talk about it before, the Internet Marketing Party here in Austin, Texas. I mean, it's really the center of the universe for a lot of entrepreneurs, online marketers, and really just a whole bunch of different stragglers that are entrepreneurs. We all just kind of run together. So I remember the very first time that I met Adam, I was invited over to a mastermind. Now, this is a place, Adam, if you remember, it was a business apartment downtown Austin. It was close over by the Frost Tower, and we were in this place. It was 2 levels. If I remember, there was like a fireplace that hung from the ceiling or something like that, or there was a fireplace in there, I think, if I remember right. Anyway, what ends up happening is we go in there for a mastermind. And what happens is David Gonzalez will have speakers come into town and they'll speak. And I don't remember if you spoke that time on stage or if we just had a mastermind there, but I remember you were talking about the documentaries and the film business that you were in, and then the dating and then the language. And I'm fascinated with brain science. And I pulled David Gonzalez off to the side and I'm like, this guy talks about film and stuff like that. Like, what does he do? Like, he's a dating coach. What's a dating coach? Well, I know what a dating coach is. No. Adam's been voted like one of the top in the world. Like, what do you mean? Like one of the top in like Nebraska, inside of like 6 counties? He's like, no, worldwide, 4 years in a row by his peers. Oh, he's also been all over TV. Well, what do you mean? Oh, he does all over media stuff. He also does a bunch of stuff behind media. He's a language expert. He's also a social engineering expert. He's also someone that's really good at persuasion, but he does it with heart. That's the big thing. There are some people out there who will teach persuasion and in dating and some really sleazy things, but persuasion comes into business analytics, business structure. So Adam is now flown all over the world for dating advice, coaching advice, business advice, structure advice, how to systematize your business overall. You and your wife and your beautiful family, like you have an entire family business in a compound right outside of Austin. And I will say this, that's very important to mention. I have called Adam at some of the most critical times in my life to help my language and to help other people understand the feelings that I couldn't get out and articulate. Adam helped me articulate this through a 10-year relationship when I went through a breakup. Adam helped me articulate this when I wrote Facebook when I was sued. Adam was the one that I called repeatedly to ask for different ideas on how to get back on Facebook. So Adam, I love you. I appreciate you. I am glad that you are here. You are a great friend. You've helped out a ton over the years. And I'm so excited that you're here, sir. Thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you. Kurt, I mean, I love you, man, but what an introduction. I really appreciate it. I think for anybody watching, I want to share with you what I want to give today. And I think at this time in life, there's something incredibly important that needs to be shared. And that is, I want to show you the huge opportunity that's in front of you. And I want to recognize the fact that you may not believe it right now. You may not be able to see it. And in this talk with Kurt, I'm going to explain why people can't see it. I'm also going to explain why I know what the hell I'm talking about. I mean, when people talk about being a dating coach, like what does a dating coach have to know about anything to do with responding in a crisis or business strategy? But actually, the reason I became a dating coach was because of how experienced I am with dealing with crisis and different strategies that arise from that. And in fact, you probably remember recently we had the entire Me Too movement. I was incredibly busy helping many dating companies with their crisis management during that time, as a lot of companies had to, change their entire, positioning. They had to change their message, and there was a lot of changes. So, Kurt, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to do this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about messaging here in just a little bit. We're actually going to talk about in lots of different levels. We have 3 different types of people who are watching, and that is beginners, and a lot of people are going to binge watch. And I want to give them opportunities of. And I want to talk about you here in just a kind of minute, going from janitor to what you did next. But there's that moment in life where you run across someone or an idea, or like you're reading something and it's like, wait a minute. Like we just talked to Mike Rhodes for an interview, for example, and Mike was talking about, he saw these Google credits, and then he found out that you can actually advertise on the site Google and make your thing rank faster than anybody else's by using paid ads. And boom, it started off and spawned a business. So I'm really curious. You were a janitor before. what did you do from janitor to make the transition to entrepreneur?
So yeah, as a janitor, I became a janitor because my dad was a janitor. And that's kind of what happens in England. You know, we grew up incredibly poor, grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, used to living with, you know, I remember there were days where it would be like, you don't get to have bacon for breakfast today because you had bacon for breakfast yesterday. So now it's somebody else's turn. And that was like life. And as a janitor, what you have is a lot of free time. You're waiting for light bulbs to need changing, someone to take their trash out, delivering the mail. And it was for a big apartment complex in London. And, you know, I took over the job because my dad gave it to me, but I'm a smart cookie and I'm hungry for information. So I would sit at a desk for 12 hours a day and I would go online and I would read things. Now, as a young, early 20-something male, the only thing I really cared about was meeting and attracting women. And so I spent a lot of time studying and reading all that material. But that led to me finding other careers and doing different things. But they all revolved around the same subject, essentially, which was communication. And I moved into a number of different industries, but probably the thing that I was most known for before being a dating coach was working in public relations as a crisis PR manager. And I used to work with a wonderful woman by the name of Elizabeth Murdoch, who's Rupert Murdoch's daughter. And that gave me a unique insight into the way the world was run. And as a crisis PR expert, I had to be able to spot problems before they arise and know how to react to them. So again, I'll say that skill set.
And experts that I have on here, they all do this, which is great. You move and you talk very quickly, which is great. But just to be clear, you worked with the daughter of who?
Of Rupert Murdoch.
Who is that exactly? What does he do?
So Rupert Murdoch is the number one media mogul in the world. We're talking Fox News. We're talking Sky in the UK. I mean, he's behind all the major media publications in the world. He controls the news and the media and what's written. Or at least he used to be. Before he handed
what you said in about 3 seconds, I want everyone to really understand is you have learned crisis management not from a college course where you sat down with a booklet. You had worked with someone who literally knew the backbone of how propaganda, news, and this messaging is formatted. Sorry, you said it in about 3 seconds, and I wanted everyone to know, hang on a second. You literally learned like the bowels of the news, literally. So please go ahead and continue.
Yeah, no, actually, it's funny. Now you mention it. I take it for granted, but like I used to hang out. She prefers Liz to Elizabeth. I used to hang out at Liz's house all the time. Her staff would cook for me, and her boyfriend at the time. I'm not sure if they're still together. This is a while ago now, but he was a very big public relations expert, and I ran the public relations department for a number of big TV shows for Shine Productions, which is Elizabeth Murdoch's TV company, and in that TV show, in that TV company, I was in charge of predicting the media and what would happen next. And after working at that company, I moved on through her partner and ended up working with some of the world's largest corporations to just brag. And I know this isn't something we've even spoken about that much, but to list some brands I've worked with, Nescafe, PepsiCo, I've worked with Nike, I've worked with Yum Group, which is Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, and many, many other companies. Krispy Kreme for a little bit.
So here's an interesting question for you. I've never asked you this before. So you're a dating coach. You have a lot of other businesses. Like I said, you coach on business structure. So very interested in the PR stuff. We've talked about it a little bit over time, but not necessarily the crisis management. I've heard it come up in conversation, but we've never really dove down in that. So why is it someone like a large corporation, you don't have to put any labels on it, why would a large corporation call you instead of their 25 lawyers, their 75 people in the marketing department? Why is it they call you at that time for messaging?
So if you own a company and a crisis is about to happen, the worst thing you can do is be reactive. You don't want to respond to the crisis. You want to preempt the crisis and make it go away before it impacts you. Because let's be real, ultimately what it comes down to is revenue, and a negative impact in the press or in the media that ends up being a direct attack on customers will cause huge issues for your company. Actually, we're seeing this right now with the coronavirus affecting Corona beer sales. It's ludicrous to imagine that a virus that just happens to share a name as a beer would impact beer sales. But, just to be safe, better not buy Corona. And that is a huge failing on the crisis PR department of Corona beer. They should have been all over it and spun that into an opportunity for massive growth. And that's my specialty. And it's funny because I did PR for years, and obviously I used it for my own dating company. When I launched my dating coaching company, I ended up getting on Steve Harvey and the Today Show. And everyone's like, how did you do that? And I was like, well, I've worked in PR. I just did my own PR. And people try to hire me to do it for them. And I was like, no, but that's not my specialty. And they're like, well, what is your specialty? I'm like, crisis. And no one knows what that is except right now today. Today, everyone cares about my crisis PR background because I'm one of the few people in the world that knows how to make a crisis vanish. And actually, I think the best advert for how good I am at crisis management, Kurt, just to brag, the Me Too movement affected every single dating company except mine.
Yeah. So
Yep.
let's go back. Hang on. You covered a whole bunch of stuff that I want to absolutely unpack here, right?
There's a lot here. This is going to be huge.
This is a lot, right? So it's very interesting. So it's very important. This is part of the brain science. I've had a lot of brain scientists. I've had a lot of brain people on here. I've had a doctorate on here as well too. And a lot of it comes down, people who've been on Sally Jesse Raphael and Oprah. I think you know Rhonda Britton. Maybe if you haven't, I'll have to introduce you. So anyway, we're talking about labeling, right? There's certain words that you use during certain times that are relevant, during other times they're not. You talked about Corona. One interesting thing is back in the 80s. Back in the 80s, there used to be this diet pill, AIDS, AIDS. So once AIDS came over, it's like, hey, Adam, did you take your AIDS? Well, I think we're going to have to rename the company and do complete different branding. So you talked about Corona should have been jumped on this opportunity. How do you see that prediction of what's supposed to happen in the market? Like, do you get a phone call of like, hey, this is going to go down and no one knows it yet? Or, hey, we need to be paying attention that something like this doesn't happen because a deal's pending? Or can you explain that just a little bit? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. So there's a lot to this. And actually, I'm going to talk later on about a guide I created especially for you that will make sure that everyone watching this gets access to. I have an entire format I use to analyze what's going on and to teach people how to react to this. But so if we like, say, for example, look at a company that got hit by this early, which was Royal Caribbean Cruise Lines. They were one of the first people to hit. And funny enough, they knew about quarantines. I think I go on cruises like 2 or 3 times a year. And every third cruise, they have to quarantine because there's a stomach bug, right? So they knew how to handle it. And yet they got overwhelmed by this thing straight away. Now, most of the time, a bug going wild on a cruise ship doesn't enter the media. And as a crisis media expert, one of the things we do is called media monitoring, where we monitor the news every day for things that are out of the ordinary. And whenever the news is out of the ordinary, we know it's time to, just put an eye on it and see what's happening. Over the last 6 months, I've noticed that a lot of the media, there were some weird things happening that were out of the ordinary. Consequently, as a family, we started to prepare. We got, obviously, I actually predicted a quarantine about 3 months ago. And so we geared up with everything. I'm in my home studio now. We have a studio that's 30 minutes from here, but I predicted road shutdowns. So we started moving all the equipment and getting everything set up here well in advance. And that comes from that media monitoring. Now, Royal Caribbean should have predicted that with one big cruise going down and it ended up in the media, once again, they should have pivoted straight away. And to me, there was an obvious opportunity for them, which was actually in their entertainers. I believe they should have created a competitor to Netflix at that exact moment, where the minute they knew they had to shut down Royal Caribbean, they've got all these entertainers and they create this live entertainment network. Think about it. We know where to go online to watch TV shows and movies, but where do you watch theater productions? Where do you watch live events? Royal Caribbean pumps out live events every single night on every single cruise ship. What a great opportunity for them to create free online entertainment for people to watch comedy shows, to watch their entertainers. And of course, they keep those eyeballs, create a new ad platform, and get themselves set up for where this all blows over.
Well, I start thinking about sorry for interruption, but just to clarify what you're talking about here is one of the things we were talking about with John Morrow before is how to get people emotionally involved, right? So what I hear you saying is like, hey, what they could have done, because they have all the technology set up, and that's what you've already said, right? They've already had the technology set up. But if they would have got the technology to set up to broadcast this, people would have watched around the world from, hey, support Carnival Cruises, watch these so-and-so people as they're quarantined and Italy won't let them in and so-and-so won't let them in. I would have watched the entertainers to help support at that time. It would have created a whole other network. You're 100% correct.
And you got to remember, they already had the broadcasting capabilities because they already broadcast everything to the rooms on the ship. All they had to do was take that feed and upload it. Yeah, this would have been huge. And more importantly, you see this preparation. Now, all live theater is down. New York, Broadway, the West End, none of them have a platform for live entertainment. There was an opportunity for a cruise line to be the #1 provider of live entertainment in the world, and they missed it. With free advertising, they missed it.
So so this may be of interest to you. Maybe we can talk about this online. So there's a friend of mine, and I'm going to mention the number, and you may know who this is, but he holds the world record for having over 350,000 people on a webinar at a time. Do you know who this person is?
I don't know who it is.
Well, I can introduce you. So anyway, they were looking for bandwidth, right? So we talk about Carnival Cruises, what they could have done. Interesting enough, how do you host a webinar with 350,000 people who has bandwidth that's available to do that kind of stuff to places? Major League Baseball and NASDAQ, they have these big data pipes, especially like Major League Baseball, like what you just said. They're not using it whatsoever at all. Carnival Cruises could literally fire it up. There are two partnerships that they just don't talk to each other, and they have no idea that they could have made it happen just like that. So let's talk about go ahead.
I just want to jump on the key piece here that's missing. Like, because you work in advertising. Right now, those brands can gain free access. If you contact any network, any journalist in the world, and you say, I am coming with Carnival Cruises or Royal Caribbean, I have something to say, they're going to pick up the phone because your name is in the media. This, you know, without getting political from him, Trump knew this, and that's how he ran the first election. Every time they spoke about him, he picked up the phone and got himself in the press. So right now, the press want to work with it. And this is what a crisis PR person does. We see a problem, we predict it, and then we craft the story we want to share that increases revenue in our pockets. And what's fascinating is every business owner, every wannabe business owner, every big business owner, you have two different types of audience. There's the home audience, your own customers and mailing list and fans, and then you've got the remote audience, which is in the news. So there are two opportunities here for you to grow if you do it right.
So there are a bunch of rabbit holes I'd love to go down and unpack with you, but before I get down on all the stuff that I want to geek out about. So again, there's three different types of people that are here, right? A lot of people are coming in, and again, they're just binge watching. Totally cool. We want to give them some ideas of like, hey, what would you do if you could start over? And then we have, again, the advanced of, hey, we want to help people become a more well-rounded marketer, which I've learned from you is in language and labeling and being really specific. And then some experts that want to dive in deeper. I also know that you have, well, let's actually talk about this for just a second, because this is a really good segue. So I've done a lot of these interviews over the last couple of days, a ton of them, listening to a lot of entrepreneurs on what they're doing differently, not only in 2020, but over the course of the last decade, 15, Ryan Lee, 20 years. It's interesting, I almost say this on every call now, is essentially it used to be about 100,000 clicks. If you can only get 100,000 clicks or hundreds of thousand clicks, and then tens of 20s of thousands of emails. And then now, this is a perfect segue, we're going to talk about crisis management. We're going to talk about crisis messaging. Well, what's a great way to do crisis messaging? You can put it on a billboard, you can do an email, you can do an opt-in, or you can just send a text message that fires off an exchange, a one-on-one exchange, a lot more relaxing than just a broadcast of, hey, buy my shiny stuff. We want to talk about this experience and give out the number, and I can give out the name. You can as well too. This is very interesting, especially in this time of messaging.
Absolutely. So, and I love this because you'll see this online. There's going to be a lot of people coming forward as content creators over the next few weeks. They're gearing up right now. They're buying the equipment, they're learning it, and they're trying it. And these content creators are going to saturate the market. This will be the second wave of the crisis. Crisis, they come in waves. There's like the fallout as problem becomes problems, especially at the size that we're dealing with now. And right now, as always in marketing, you have to stand out. You have to zig when everyone else zags. And what we're seeing right now is everyone collecting emails, everyone running advertising, and everybody trying to be a regular content creator. Instead, in a world where there's no human connection because of the distancing that's been created with the social distancing and people learning to work from home, you know, the amount of people using Zoom and what have you, you want your message to be different. So what we're doing is doing something completely different. We're inviting people on private texts, like an actual communication. You can have a phone call, a text message we're drilling in and offering that personal experience. So yeah, for anybody watching this, this is for you as well. I've got a number. We're based in Austin, Texas. It's an Austin, Texas number, and you can text us. And you're not going to end up with some short code weird message. It's a real text message to a real person. It's actually, you're going to be texting my wife, my girlfriend. So it's 512-894-8428. And what I'd like to give you is what I mentioned earlier, which is our crisis guide. That's the guide that I use with companies to make sure they're doing things the right way and seeing the opportunity. So if you text that number, the following word, I want you to text Kurt Crisis Guide and your name so we know who you are and we can talk to you. And the reason I'm doing that is because Kurt is actually the person that motivated me to create this specifically for you. I wanted to make something special because I love Kurt, and Kurt's been a very good friend of mine for many years. And I want to know that you will come from Kurt, because I want to make sure that we look after you and give you the guide that we made especially for Kurt's followers.
I really appreciate that. So I want to break a couple of things down. A lot of brain science here. I want to talk about labels, right? Because labels include judgment and certain words that we use, triangulate. Like, this is all inside of crisis management, right? So yeah. Dating coach. I'm going to go back to dating coach. So I hear dating coach and I'm like, oh, it's a bunch of guys who want to go out and try to figure out how to pick up chicks, and got it. And then what I learned from Adam, the real psychology, is it's a lot of people just want to be heard. They just want to be understood. They want to be accepted. And these are raw human emotions. It's like, hey, dating coach, yeah, there's a lot of actually very wealthy people that pay Adam to learn how to communicate better. That's what the whole thing comes down to. It comes down to communication. It's not, oh, hey, I'm going to look better and I'm going to, what they call peacock sometimes. It is, hey, I'm going to use a very specific language pattern because I really want to connect with people. And this is why I know that you avoided the YouTube movement, because you're very open, you're very direct. You are not manipulative. There's persuasion, but it's not manipulation. So actually, let's talk about that for a minute, because PR can get interesting in the news, the difference between persuasion and manipulation. Do you mind to comment on that for a minute, sir?
Yeah, of course. So there is a huge difference. One of the biggest is when it comes to dating, for me, it was a no-brainer to get into that because it was something I was interested in. And, when you come to building your own business, it should be something you care about, something you're passionate about, and something you know you can make work. And I saw a lot of dating coaches saying the wrong things in the media. My message was very clear right from the beginning. If you can't get a group of people to be your friends that you're attracted to, how are you going to date any of them? So my message is always the same. Start by making friends with people you're naturally attracted to. Yeah. And then you can choose who you want to date, right? But if you can't even get them to want to be your friend, why are you even trying to date them? And that focus was very different. And of course, this predated the Me Too movement by years. But I knew that the marketing was trying to get edgier and edgier. They were trying to outdo each other. It went from be mean to women to attract them right through to, you can force people to do whatever, which was the climax of the Me Too movement. But my message bypassed all of that because I was just like, no, don't force anyone to do anything. If you can get people to like you just as a friend, you have plenty of choice for who you want to date. And it doesn't matter if 3 of the people that you're friends with don't want to date you, the other 20 do. And so that gives you choice.
I'm going to give away a little secret that you have, and it's just because I'm inside of one of your other groups and I'm really curious on brain psychology and stuff like that. And I've worked with other dating coaches in the past, meaning that helping run their program, very interested in their inner workings. And some of them do this thing called where you're negging on a girl, where you're all of a sudden saying all these negative things and doing these negative things. And if they don't show up for the date, you say this other negative thing, you do this takeaway. And what Adam always does, which I love about you and which you train, is people will get stood up on a date and they'll be like, well, did you still go out with the group of friends that you invited that person to? Well, what do you mean? Well, I thought this first date was supposed to be with a bunch of friends. This is supposed to be about friends meeting up. And then you can really be a little bit more polarizing and attractive. If you're only relying on just this one thing over and over and over, that's not the deal. You really show how people how to build communities, which really changes their lives, which helps with their dating life, instead of just going straight for the dating. Will you talk about building communities for just a minute?
Yeah, and actually, I want to give you something key there. I think this is really important for marketing as well. The message that I send if somebody doesn't turn up on a date is, are you okay? And marketers, especially when they do their email campaign, if somebody doesn't open an email, they think of them as a faceless human being and then ignore them. They're like, oh, that's my opt out, my unsubscribe, my unopen. But we'll message, are you okay? we say, we notice that you normally open our emails and you haven't opened one for a few days. We're hoping that means that you're having the success you want and everything's great. But if not, would you mind writing back just so we know you're okay? And on dates, we do the same thing. If somebody doesn't turn up today, you go, hey, you didn't turn up today. I just want to make sure everything's okay. Like, you didn't get in an accident or anything. Please let me know. It always triggers a response because human beings, they don't want to feel that like, oh my gosh, this person thinks I'm hurt. And the fact that you care almost always guarantees you the next day. And the same with our clients. The fact that we care, our open rates go through the roof again. And it's just showing that extra level of treating people like a human being. And that's, like you mentioned, that's a key part about building a culture and a group. Our followers, our fans love us because we love them. We're in the lockdown right now, obviously filming, we're doing the quarantine thing. But on my land out here, I've got a 44-acre ranch and we've got about 10 people living out here. These were people that we pre-warned 6 weeks ago that this was going to go down. We started developing farmland out here. We bought chickens and eggs. We built a community of people. It's like different husbands and wives and friends that we all knew hadn't been exposed. We spent 14 days not interacting with anybody else, so we knew the land would be clear and that we would be clear. And now we all come together, we socialize, we interact, we cook together. We just had incredible food this evening, cooking food from our land. And it was all because I preempted this, and then we built a community. And these people, we all love each other. We work together, we interact together. And that's a key part of building and sustaining great communities. And we'll keep this going until the end of the crisis and we can all move out again. But while we see other people going stir crazy in their homes out here on the land, everyone's got their own space, everyone's got their own building, and everyone's, enjoying kind of like life is normal. It's like a long vacation.
So let's talk about messaging just a little bit, especially now. So this video is going to run for all 2020. It's just an interesting time right now. So for messaging, how important is it for people to get messaging locked down for what's going on in the market? Like, how often are you changing messaging with the market? That's probably a better question.
So Stanley Milgram, one of the most famous psychologists as far as it comes to human behavior, especially with things like obedience and leadership, he discovered that human beings are equally likely to be led as to lead. But right now, in this current state of crisis, we call it a crisis, people are anxious. They're looking at the news, they're seeing negativity, and that's because negativity draws eyeballs. They're fearful, they're uncertain, and human beings don't do well in uncertainty and fear. What happens in those moments is your body gets cortisol. And cortisol is the stress hormone. And actually, I explain a lot about this in that guide, which you should download and get. And I can talk a bit about one of my clients, actually, that I'm helping with their positioning and their messaging. They're a dog trainer. And as a dog trainer, they were making really good money. Not a lot of money, but 12 grand a month, which is good for a dog trainer. But the minute this happened, they suddenly couldn't train dogs. While everybody else is waiting for this to blow over, and a couple of people are doing online dog training programs, right? Like digital programs. This person instantly went with my guidance to virtual dog training, with the idea being that right now your dog is locked at home with you and you're creating bad behaviors. And a online program, an online course, a video program isn't going to cut it. Remember what I said earlier about everyone's going to try and do this generic digital content that everyone was doing a few weeks ago? No one's going to care anymore because everyone's creating free content. There's a glut of content. So we always want to move into where no one else will go. And that usually means more effort and more connection. So while everybody else is now going to, I'm going to create free content all the time and then try and get you to buy my program, we're going to, let's have real human communication as best we can when we physically can't be together. And this person's seeing a great uptake in their virtual dog coaching, but live, one-on-one. So they're getting that personal, intimate experience. And all they're doing is taking their original message and imagining a world where we have to continue in this space of remote distancing. Because like you said, it's all of 2020. Hopefully things return back to normal. But let's be real, the normal was always going to be virtual. We were already moving to that world with Oculus and all these other developments. Yeah. Humans were becoming more physically remote and getting better at, how many people do you know that are entrepreneurs that want to travel the world? We all like this idea of actually working remotely. And so all that's happened is this crisis. It's not really a crisis. It's a catalyst for the change that was going to happen anyway, but it's happening now. Rather than it slowly going away over time, it's happening right now. Like, we're seeing these old technologies that just aren't needed anymore vanish overnight because there is a more digital, virtual experience. The faster you adopt that, while also not copying what the crowds are doing, by thinking like, what is a more personal version of this? You're going to crush. And that's the opportunity right now that people should be thinking about, and what we're guiding people through with our strategy guide.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that we were talking about on another interview was like restaurants, for example. And I'm not saying this is every restaurant by any means, but like, for instance, we just got food delivered for dinner just right now. And some restaurants will start figuring out the numbers of, well, wait a minute. If we just did only delivery and didn't have the restaurant, didn't have the 12,000 square feet, we weren't paying $30,000 or $20,000 or $15,000 a month. And if we could just have a communal kitchen where we cooked with 4 other restaurants and just did delivery, oh my goodness, look at those margins. Well, now all of a sudden there's opportunities for communal restaurants where they can just cook in an area and have everything delivered. There's lots of other delivery services out there. There's lots of different opportunity that's in a time like this, but a lot of it all comes down to messaging as well. So Adam, you deal with this other kind of brain psychology I really wanted to ask you about, and then I want to get a little bit more into your product. So fear. There's 2 different types of people out there right now, right? This is a broad brush stroke, but there is, hey, why me? What am I going to do? Oh my God, what am I going to do? And it goes into the cycle. And there are other people that are like, hey, I got a plan and I'm going to dive right. I know this is part of crisis management, but what do you tell people that are so fearful right now?
So everybody that has fear right now is basically restricted due to cortisol in their brain, which is the fear chemical, to one of 3 actions: fight, flight, or freeze. Fight means they're going to be overly aggressive. They're going to do things like deny what's going on. They're going to push really hard and grind, Gary Vee style, to try and make lots of sales irrespective of what's happening. And then there's flight. They're going to be avoidant. Not going to touch my company. I'm going to sit back and just pretend it isn't happening. And then lastly is freeze. I don't know what to do, so I will just do nothing, absolutely nothing. And the reason for this is cortisol is this self-defense mechanism. The idea is if I throw a knife at you, you don't want to sit there and calculate what kind of knife it is as it's hitting you. You want to be like, okay, I'm going to have an instinctive response. So either dodge out the way, duck and freeze, or grab it and throw it back if you've been trained to do that. But your human body will always default to the instinct that you typically do. In almost any of these situations, it's wrong. Would you want your company to be run by somebody that was purely making instinctive decisions? Or would you want a company that was run on pre-planning strategy and, to use one of Kurt Marley's favorite words, math and facts? And right now, the most important thing is to develop that strategy. And actually, as a crisis public relations expert, my job was to predict the problems and write strategies for them. I used to sit in a room all day, every day, and imagine problems and then write down step-by-step action plans for how the company would respond. And so nowadays, I don't tend to predict that far out in advance. I just watch the news and media for my own clients and my own companies, and then I give them a heads up. Hey, this is what you should watch for. This is what you should be doing, and how to pivot and develop your message correctly. And so right now, if somebody's fearful, if they're scared, what they really should be doing is actually, I'll make it easy for you. Just download the guide. You can just text that number, 512-894-8428. And just text Kurt's Crisis Guide and your name, and go through that guide, because it will literally give you a breakdown of what's going on in your brain, how to get your messaging right, and then it will give you access to what we call the Crisis Opportunity Blueprint, which is a step-by-step method of how we know, first of all, should I respond to the crisis or should I ignore it? Because there are times when you want to ignore a crisis. And this is a key thing, actually, Kurt. It's not just about this crisis. This whole blueprint is the blueprint that I use for everything. And then if you should respond to it, where's the opportunity in it? And there are some big opportunities right now for many, many people if they do this right. So if you're scared, the key thing is get control of that emotion, develop your action plan, even if it's just a daily action plan, start, and then really get ready to ramp it up.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's one of the things that I love. And I know you study the brain science. There's a lot of other experts that we've talked about as well. And unfortunately, just a lot of people just don't apply. That's one of the reasons, again, I want to do the overall summit, where it's like, hey, hopefully there's a lot of people binge watching. It'll give people a spark and idea. So let's go through these 3 levels here really quick, and I'll kind of wrap this up. So,
I want to jump in. I just want to tell you a story that I know very quickly of somebody who has a business that's doing about $700,000 a year, just to show you the scarcity of what's going on. They started trading because they predicted the collapse of the economy, and they made $70,000 in a couple of weeks trading. They're now shutting down their company to follow their new strategy of trading. And I don't know if I've made it obvious enough how bad this is. They've got a successful company that makes $700,000 a year. That business, by the way, is focused on education and helping people get careers in a bad economy, they're going to shut that down to focus on trading, which is following a strategy of predicting the market collapsing. You can see where this is going to be. It's so short term. It's not a real strategy. It's an emotional reaction.
Oh, that's so important to understand. So a couple of things. Okay. So let's talk about the beginners here for just a second. So what advice do you have for someone? And this doesn't actually have to be necessarily business advice. This could just be guidance because you do great at that, which is, hey, what is it with someone that's sitting at home right now, kind of deciding, do I go back to work? What do I do? What things would you be researching? Like if you were to start all over as an entrepreneur, what are some of the opportunities you'd be looking at?
Actually, we have a whole system for this. The first thing we do is we make them get their bread and butter. You've got basic food and bills that you need. This satisfies Maslow's second hierarchy. In Maslow's hierarchy, the level 2 hierarchy is food and bills and rent and that kind of stuff. Get a job that covers that. There are a lot of companies hiring. I just made a whole video about this on my own channel, actually, where we broke down all the different companies that are hiring. Get a job that pays the basic bills. Get ready to work 40 hours or 50 or 60 hours a week in that job. Then assign 20 hours a week, put aside to build the business. At the beginning, your job of building the business 20 hours a week is implementing one thing that you've learned. So maybe you'll implement the belt method and you'll just follow Kurt and that's just what you'll do. Or maybe you'll reach out to me and you'll follow one of our methods, or you'll find a book that you like and you'll just implement one thing. Don't worry about building the business. You've got your bread and butter covered, you've got bills covered, and now you're slowly learning the business. It takes most people about 18 months to 2 years to get really good as an entrepreneur. So rather than rushing it, I would spend that 18 months really just implementing different things. Don't be afraid of them failing. Treat it as a learning exercise. And that is going to give you a really solid foundation to grow. And maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones. Maybe your first idea will be great and it'll work, but the numbers are against you on that. You're better off just learning the process and understanding, how do I generate traffic? How do I convert that traffic into a sale? How do I fulfill that sale in a way that has my customers so happy they come back again? And that's the basics I would tell a beginner.
That was really great. All right, so let's take a look at intermediate and advanced marketers. Right now, it's constantly changing your message. I'll put the text message on the screen again too, and it is 512-894-8428. You just have to put crisis guide. So put actually Kurt crisis guide. So Kurt crisis guide. Then you got to put in your name so they can text you back and say, "Hey, it's on. How are you doing? Whatnot." So let's talk about intermediate right now. You constantly need to be changing your message, right? What advice do you have for people about changing your message right now?
In intermediate, you have a very hard job ahead of you. You're the one that's most likely to fail right now. And you have two things you have to do. The first thing you have to do is address all of your customers and explain how, through this crisis, what you are doing to mitigate the fallout on them. And this is a huge thing that you have to do right now, because your customers right now are lost and confused. And if your competitors are messaging them, telling them how they're preparing for the crisis, they're going to look like better leaders than you, and all your customers are going to slowly drip across your competitors right now. So you need to beat them to that. You also need a customer retention strategy. I explain more about this in the Crisis Opportunity Blueprint. If you download the guide, it will get you access to the blueprint, and that will talk about what steps you have to put in to retain customers, because there is going to be a fight over people that still have money, especially as we move into an economic downturn. And so you need to be fighting for those customers. So that's the first step. The second thing you need to be doing is changing every single product that you have to take into consideration the new world, a world where people live at home, where they work from home, and the new challenges that they have. Like, for example, if once upon a time you had how to be productive in the office as a program, you now need to have how to be productive at home in the home office. And so there'll be some key things you have to tweak and change in your messaging and your strategy. For example, our local Mexican restaurant switched to a drive-through restaurant. And that was an overnight change. It was a great idea. Now they have lines outside all day, every day for people coming to get the same good food, but as a drive-through. And so we're going to see these kind of changes happening, and the companies that adapt fast enough are the ones that are going to succeed. And so you need to do that.
Is great. So let's talk about experts. And when I say experts, sometimes people just need to dot the I, cross the T. You really just kind of covered this right now. But let's just say a larger company is listening to this. One of my goals is in 2020 where someone's like, man, I have an issue. You know what? You got to listen to this video that Adam recorded. Like, I'd really start to consider, what are some things that a large corporation should be thinking about right now to dot the I's, cross the T's?
right now, a large corporation should hire a crisis relations expert. Your public relations company, up to now, most PR experts I've met in the last 5 years only specialize in generating eyeballs, most of them via blogs and influencer marketing. There are very few crisis PR experts out there right now, and that is what all big corporations need. Your crisis PR expert should be all over this, making sure that your messaging is correct, making sure that they're talking to people in the right way, that you're saying things to mitigate the inevitable failure that's going to happen on your stocks. There are big companies right now that are struggling. Corona, free advertising, completely wasted. You got all the cruise lines, free advertising, completely wasted. Every travel industry, every entertainment industry. If you have a live production show of any kind and you've got recordings of those, they should be going up, and you should be looking at alternate revenue models. You really need to get your messaging right, and then you need to have a stopgap strategy that will help you fulfill while you transition into whatever your new future is. Because even if the quarantine's lifted in 3 weeks, everything has already changed. I was explaining, like, there are people right now that have registered their kids for homeschool. To show you the impacts of that, that means they've made a commitment of 1 year of their children not going to school. You think kids are going to want to go back to school after this? They're not. When people realize how effective homeschooling is, how their kids aren't going to be exposed to violence, gun crime, or bullying, how their kids are going to advance rapidly, how with the advent of online homeschooling with headphones, their kids are going to get drawn into the screens and stop bugging their parents, not just during the workday. They're going to stop bugging them throughout the entire day as the kids get plugged in, wired in, and start to create space in the home. They're not going to pick up bad habits from other kids, and parents are going to realize this is a good thing. Kids are going to realize it's a good thing. That's going to leave entire education institutions being rocky. What's one of the biggest causes of debt right now? Student debt. And people go online and do online programs and get certified and become experts. Kurt, this is a permanent change for many industries. And so if you're a big company, you need to start thinking, okay, what is the big change? And if you think that you're going to ignore it, just remember the story of Blockbuster. Blockbuster put out many video companies because they did DVD instead of VHS, and then completely ignored the fact that Netflix turned up with their streaming service and didn't compete. Right now, there are companies that if you do not adapt, you're going to end up with a Netflix version of your company, and they're going to wipe you out.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's what happened in 2000, and you were there, 2007, 2008. A lot of people went back to school because that's what you do in a down economy. You go back to school, you get an education. Many times here, as you know, as in the States, is a lot of these loans would come if you were a civil servant or a teacher. These loans would be forgiven after 10 years. And only 10% of those loans are even forgiven. And it's like, do you want really generalized knowledge right now or specialized knowledge in an industry like this where literally, if you just have an interest in gardening tomatoes, you can create a business just out of showing people how to garden tomatoes, because there's so many people out there looking for that type of information anyway. Like, it's extremely specialized, less generalized. So Adam, a question for you as we wrap this whole thing up, because I can smell the clay pot food on the other side of this wall. That's amazing. This is all going to run for 2020. What are you working on in 2020? What are you focusing on in 2020?
So right now, we already pivoted our dating brands, and we're focusing on people that are having online dating and how to safely bypass the quarantine and meet up with people without any risk. With the inclusion of home testing kits and things like that. And also how to have a virtual long distance relationship and how to build up something that goes back to courtship, but doing it virtually. So that's a big piece that we're doing. We are also focused on releasing this entire program. It's something I hoped I would never have to do in my lifetime, which is go back to my crisis experience. But I have a lot of crisis experience and helping people with managing it and also pivoting and, getting your messaging right. And so I suspect that 2020 will be a large step for me towards the direction of helping people with crisis management, crisis opportunities, and getting your message right. So that's one of the big reasons why we're doing that guide.
This is great. So remember, go ahead and text I'll put it on the screen a bunch of different times, 512-894-8428. Make sure that you type in Kurt, crisis management, crisis guide. Sorry, yeah. Crisis guide.
Right. So it actually doesn't matter. Guide. This is the best part about it. It doesn't matter because it's a real human. So they'll be able to work it out because we've moved away from that automation.
Just to make it easy. Adam, I love you. I appreciate you. Any final words before we close on out, sir?
Just, I appreciate you for having me, Kurt. Thank you very much. And for you watching this, don't wait. Now's the time to act. Do it now.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate you. Love you, my friend. I'll see you on the other side. Thanks. Take care.